Let's go.
Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Giuseppe. Today I'm gonna talk about AtomOne forging a new path in Cosmos, which AtomOne is a minimal, secure, and resilient fork of the Cosmos Hub. Let's get started. So, first, an agenda. I will provide an introduction to the project. We will go over the salient topics of the Constitution, review the tokenomics, look at the roadmap and the current status, then recap the key innovations. Also, a little bit of moving forward and looking at R&D topics, then conclusions and time for Q&A. So let's get started. So what is AtomOne? As I said already, as also in the title, AtomOne is a minimal, secure, and resilient fork of the Cosmos Hub. Essentially, it aims to become the canonical minimal IBC ICS token hub, because, as many of you may already know, the Cosmos Hub is slowly, unfortunately, drifting away from this vision, and we have many instances that actually are can be used to reinforce this statement. For example, the addition of the liquid staking module, the presence of Cosmosm on the hub, so many things. So basically, AtomOne is trying to take a step back and take on, again, the original vision of the Cosmos Hub and push it forward. Since, again, the Cosmos Hub is drifting away from it. So, in essence, AtomOne tries to provide an alternative to the Cosmos Hub, another hub to provide security and enable scaling within the Cosmos, whose focus is always sovereignty, security, and decentralization, which become the uttermost, the most important aspects to always champion and further develop. So, as I already anticipated, why fork the Cosmos Hub? Well, the Cosmos Hub, unfortunately, as I said, is drifting away from its original vision. One example being the change in staking that was done with Prop 848, in which the maximum inflation was lowered from 20% to 10%, and basically crippling the staking system, because originally, or at least in the canonical staking implementation, inflation is meant to float dynamically between two bounds, 7 and 20%, in order to disincentivize non-staking and try to target a 2/3 bonding ratio. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore on the Cosmos Hub. With Prop 848, the system, although the code is still there, was practically crippled because inflation was higher than 10%, and by lowering the maximum to 10%, it cannot grow anymore. And in fact, correlation is not causation, but it's interesting to notice that after this proposal has passed, the bonding ratio has been slowly lowering, and it's now around 60%, which is basically, I think, I wouldn't say the lowest level it has ever been, but it's close. And it's unfortunately going lower. It's hovering around 60%, but sometimes it can go lower, sometimes it can raise a little bit, but it's definitely long distance from the 67% target. And again, the desire for minimalism in order to have strong security properties, because similar to the Cosmos Hub, the idea is with AtomOne, the key service that is provided to the Cosmos is scaling through security, to strong security properties. And so if we give away minimalism and security, we are basically going against what we are striving for. Another thing that was actually, for people that remember this, was part of the plan for the Cosmos Hub was the building of a constitution. Funnily enough, that didn't happen. The Cosmos Hub was launched without one. But with AtomOne, we tried to fix also that, and in fact, launch with a constitution, which is what we did. So, in the constitution itself, at the beginning, there is a little bit of, we present a little bit of a vision, and I've written some excerpts from that statement that you can see here. to create a free world enabling voluntary and border-state transactions, to facilitate permissionless innovation, and to foster a diverse ecosystem of specialized zones. One could argue these might be generic enough to apply not only to the AtomOne Hub, but really to many other projects, including at least originally the Cosmos Hub. The problem is exactly that for us at least, we set them in stone. They're written in the Constitution, basically meaning that whoever participates to AtomOne is pretty much inherently requested or more or less forced to abide by this vision because they accept it as a founding principles of the chain and the entire ecosystem. I've talked about the Constitution. Let's dive a little deeper into that. So the Constitution is a piece of document that actually was the fruit of many months of effort, started from an original write-up from Jay, I think around at the time of Proposal 82. For people that don't remember, this was the ATOME 2.0 proposal, which was one of, well, I would say at least arguably the second time the Cosmos Hub signaled, or part of the Cosmos Hub community signaled the intent to drift away from the original vision. The first being arguably the proposal to put Cosmosm on the hub, which at the time, Proposal 69 didn't pass, but unfortunately, we now have Cosmosm on the hub. So the Constitution establishes the foundation for governance, the economic model, and the operating system. By operating system here, I don't mean in software terms. I really mean how the system works, right? Also, it strictly and clearly mandates that all governance proposals, including, of course, laws and amendments, need to align with the provision of the Constitution. A little bit more leeway is given to amendments because, of course, they need to innovate upon the Constitution. So they have, again, a little bit more leeway. But in general, everything that happens on the AtomOne Hub needs to abide by the Constitution. And as I said, acts as a guiding framework for the entire AtomOne community because it establishes the founding principle, the foundational principles. That's a living document. Most important, I want to mention, it's not set in stone in a way that cannot change. It's actually a piece of text that is on the chain itself, but that piece of text can and will be updated. The mechanism through which that's going to happen is through amendment proposals, which will actually include the patch that will modify the Constitution, in particular in a unified diff format that for the techies that are attending the presentation should know what I'm talking about. It's also the format that Git uses, for example, because in that way, well, for many reasons, representation is more compact. It's clearly stated what gets deleted, what gets added or modified, and there is no risk of entirely overwriting or deleting sections without this being explicitly stated in the patch. So again, but that means it's a living document and can and will be changed using this process by submitting a specific amendment proposal, but nonetheless, it can be changed. Alongside the Constitution and within the Constitution, also laws have been established, or at least have been introduced as a mean to complement and enhance the Constitution itself. For those, also there will be, and there is actually already, a specific proposal, which is law proposals, for which, well, I didn't mention that for amendments, there is a constitutional majority level. So to pass, they need a much higher consensus among voters, 90% and above. For laws, that's the same, although there are instances in which this passing threshold can be lowered, but we will see about that in a few slides. The Constitution starts with a preamble and a declaration of intent. The preamble, funnily enough, is heavily inspired from the actual preamble of the US Constitution, although you can imagine is contextualized within Cosmos and the AtomOne project. But it sets in stone the mission and vision, in some sense, of the entire project. And again, I've written some excerpts here so you can appreciate the at least 3 phrases from from the preamble. And in particular, the Constitution actually starts with "we the people of Cosmos" in order to create a free world. Also, AtomOne Hub aims to complement the broader Cosmos ecosystem, again, as I said before, to offer an alternative to the Cosmos Hub, and also tries to address the diverse and evolving challenges within the Cosmos ecosystem. For example, this push for monetization of staking tokens, which for us instead was an issue, or for example, liquid staking module on the Cosmos Hub, which we all discovered, funny business with that. And again, we want to try to address these challenges in a structured and formal way, try to always put, to always be rigorous in our process. So after the preamble and the declaration of intent, the fundamental foundational principles of the Constitution are stated. I already said this, and I probably will say this 3 or 4 more times, but I want to stress it out. For the AtomOne Hub project, minimalism, security, and resilience in blockchain design are paramount, and are the values that are at the uttermost importance and will never be compromised. Another important thing that it's done in this initial section is to establish the sovereignty of the AtomOne Hub. Might seem too forward-thinking in some sense, because it's also done, at least in my opinion, looking forward at the future when blockchains might become nation states. But it's a constitution, so we had to pretty much do this and establish the sovereignty of the AtomOne Hub, at least in preparation for future moves towards getting to a network state. Also, the rights and liberties of both cosmonauts and citizens are established. By cosmonaut, it's meant any token holder of tokens in the whole Cosmos ecosystem. And by citizens, it means physical people that are stakers in the AtomOne Hub. I wanna stress out physical, actual people, because entities can also participate, but they don't get the same rights as individuals, which are classified as citizens. So they have a proper classification and more rights in some sense. It also reinforces the need for alignment of any future proposals, both laws or regular proposal, with the Constitution itself. And there are also mechanisms in place for at least making sure all the proposals abide to the Constitution. We'll see that in a second. And there is an emphasis on decentralization and community governance. Let's look at governance, which is the second topic inside the Constitution. First of all, there are essentially 2 types of passing thresholds on AtomOne. One is a 2/3 supermajority, that is for all proposals. And the other one is a constitutional majority that is for laws and amendments. I think we did, of course, since we raised the minimum passing threshold to 2/3, we comfortably were able to remove the no with veto vote option that was really contentious and has been a contentious vote option throughout the whole Cosmos history, one could argue. So we got rid of that. So hopefully no more controversy around that. We also raised the minimum voting period to a hard minimum of 3 weeks. And another piece of software that actually is already deployed, although inactive, is that the extension of the voting period in case quorum is reached too close to the end of the original voting period, an extension of up to 2 weeks. This was actually work we did over a year ago now, back when we were working on the decentralized initiative. We also actually proposed it on the Cosmos Hub forum. Unfortunately, it wasn't picked up, but we really thought it was important, and so we added it. Even again, for now, it's still disabled, but the code is there for AtomOne. Not everything, of course, is written in the Constitution in general, but specifically here, I'm talking about governance. For many reasons, the Constitution needs to be lean and readable, and to, for example, to write to describe precisely how governance works, even simply referencing to the actual implementation of the XGov module would have bloated the constitution, arguably. So we allow explicitly within the constitution the ability to refine further and enhance the governance process through future laws. Here is a hopefully clear enough, but you don't need to really understand it. You just need to grasp what's going on here of the governance structure. At the top, we have the ATONE hub governance, which is all the voters on the ATONE hub, all the stakers. And then in a tree-like structure, we have some core DAOs. I'm going to talk more about those in a second, and special purpose DAOs. But what I want to stress out here, because of course you may not understand, for example, what are the red lines? What are the red arrows? What is the green arrow? What I want you to appreciate is that since all DAOs can also have sub-DAOs, and actually here in this image, I'm stopping at level 2, but reality is it can go arbitrarily nested, arbitrarily deep. You can create a tree structure, in which at the top we have the ATOMOne hub governance with some caveats, because the core DAOs have some special powers. However, again, what this creates is a tree structure of DAOs, all of which ultimately respond to the hub chain governance. Looking at the DAOs more in detail, as I mentioned, this is another piece of the constitution, although more will have to be done through laws and specific documents for the specific DAOs, for example, the mandates and eventual bylaws for these DAOs. But all in all, what's important is that we have essentially two core DAOs, a steering DAO, which is the task of the steering DAO is to provide guidance and advisory on all proposals and in general activity that on the ATOMOne hub. In particular, I think that probably you have read in the previous slide, but I want to stress out here, is that an important role that the steering DAO has is the ability to lower the passing threshold for laws with endorsement from the constitutional majority to a two-thirds supermajority. And so basically, their role is to essentially facilitate governance by providing guidance and by basically facilitating directly by lowering the passing threshold if a law proposal is endorsed. The oversight DAO instead has the job of oversight, as the name suggests, and in particular needs to ensure compliance with the constitutional laws of everything that happens on the ATOMOne hub. How to do that? Two powers, well, three really. First is veto power. That branches into two kind of possibilities. The first is to veto proposals, both on core and special purpose DAOs, as well as the hub itself. This is a strong power. So even in the Constitution, it's explicitly stated that this need to be used sparingly, because otherwise it would be ripe for abuse or could even stall governance if misused. But need I remind you, people inside these DAOs are always replaceable. There will be a process to potentially dismiss people or the entire group if they misbehave. They can also freeze operations on any DAO by means of freezing transactions, by vetoing transactions. And another important power that they have is the ability to what we call, even in the Constitution, ban time, which essentially means increase the voting period for proposals that they deem necessary to have more deliberation. So these are the two core DAOs that, as you have imagined, and now I hope that at least vaguely these arrows kind of make sense now. These are the core DAOs that really have a role also in governance. Then we have the special purpose DAOs that are specifically built with a narrow scope. For example, one that will be surely created because it's already envisioned is the Biddle DAO that is in charge of supporting development. And of course, as I mentioned before, any DAO can have a sub-DAO, so core DAOs and other specialized DAOs, as well as sub-DAOs themselves, so that the ultimate structure will be a tree. The other thing that we discuss is the let's say economics around the AtomOne hub, and in particular, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the dual token model. Because I haven't anticipated to you before, there is a push, for example, on the Cosmos Hub to change the nature of Atom from staking token to monetary token. In fact, some of you may recall that during Prop 848, we even wrote an article whose title was actually Atom Must Not Be Money, and we provided some sound arguments on why not. But still, this push is happening. So when we started designing and talking about AtomOne, an important piece of the puzzle was to provide this separation and allow the staking token to be the staking token and leave it be and leave it as is and working properly as a staking token. But that also means to provide a token that is as more money-like property, pass me the term, that is specifically intended to pay for fees. Initially, the design was we were thinking about implementing the second token, which we called Photon, as a sort of, not really, but amenable to a liquid staking derivative. But then we realized that the resulting design would have been unnecessarily complex. And so we went for a much, much simpler design in which there is a one-way burn from ATONE to Photon using a simple conversion formula, which is the one written at the bottom of the Photon side, with the total amount of mintable Photon capped at 1 billion. Photon is going to be the fee, and it's the fee token. So it's going to be used to pay for all fees, including IBC and ICS payments. The only transaction that will really be allowed to be done using ATONE for fees will be the burn ATONE to Photon transaction. And of course, this frees up ATONE to be an actual and fully fledged staking token. So act as the staking and governance token. The second bullet here really is a rewarding of the first in some sense. It's a more formal way of saying it. So ATONE functions as voting shares, economic incentives, and security bonds. And most importantly, allows the dynamic inflation to work as intended within the design bounds between 7 and 20%, targeting the 2/3 bonding ratio. So here's a little bit of a schema recapping what's the economic model. So again, ATONE has inflation that is basically a punishment tax for non-stakers. They are subject to dilution, so they are disincentivized from non-staking. The staked ATONE is converted into bonded share units. This is a internal implementation representation of your delegation, essentially, that is done mainly for, well, I would say, arguably, that's the reason for performance. It's simplified massively, slashing and reward distribution. Of course, by staking ATONE, you also get entitlement to receive a proportional to your stake a part of the accrued fees from ICS or generic transactions, or to have a say in deciding on how those funds get spent. This has to be really figured out, but it's a minor difference. What matters is that by staking, of course, you participate actively in the network, which means you are entitled to profits of the network, or at least proportional to your stake. So Photon, instead, again, the supply is controlled via ATONE burning. And as I said, is used for all transaction fees except the ATONE to Photon burn transaction. And on the right, you can see a little bit of a schema which kind of tries to summarize what I've talked about in a very, very simplified manner. Of course, also, it doesn't cover all the, for example, here, it's not really evident the fact that, yes, rewards are accrued and claimed by the citizen, but they will be denominated mostly in Photon, which means they don't necessarily will need to burn, at least the stakers, unless they need them because they need them, but they will accrue photon, which they use already to do activity on the chain. But of course, they are also allowed, because that's going to be the implementation, to burn existing ATONE and mint new photon with that 1 billion cap, of course. Another piece of the puzzle is the initial supply. Some of you may know we already actually launched the chain. So this was the proposed initial distribution. It actually became the official one because the chain, is already live. The funny thing is that the ultimate way the distribution is shaped wasn't decided by us. Our initial distribution. By the way, let me mention, the distribution is shaped based on votes on Proposal 848 on the Cosmos Hub. So based on how you voted or not voted, you're going to get an airdrop for AtomOne. Initially, what we did was to reshape the distribution so that the no and no with veto voters would have a bigger amount of voting power on the future AtomOne hub chain. But funnily enough, the community during our GovGen town halls, GovGen, by the way, is as an intermediary chain that we use to essentially deliberate on the future of AtomOne. They wanted these bonuses for no and no with veto to be higher. And so what we ended up having is an initial distribution where a little bit more than a little bit less, sorry, slightly, I think a little bit more than 60% of the initial distribution, not accounting for the community pool and the middle DAO allocation, is going to consist of no and no with veto voters from Proposal 848 on the Cosmos Hub. The initial supply, of ATONE is 107 million circa. We came up to a number and then we applied the decimation factor, so divided it by 10 all amounts, and we go to these 107 millions. The initial photon supply is, of course, 0. There is no pre-minted photon, and the module is not even deployed yet. So, once it will be deployed, then photon will start to be minted. Also, we entirely slashed the ICF, and they won't have any allocation on they don't have any allocation on the AtomOne hub. But we, by slashing ICF, we had some leeway, a little bit of a wiggle room to provide some funds for the community pool and future use for the middle DAO, which again is going to be the special purpose DAO charged with the funding and the progressing development. Around 5 million ATONE each, around 10%, a little bit, I think, less than 10% than the total. No, a little bit less than 10% of the total amount, or a little bit more, because it's 107. Sorry, it was 90 something plus the 10. Okay, so let's look at the roadmap now. That's another thing that actually GovGen voted for, and so we designed alongside with the community, essentially. And as you can see, the roadmap is divided into 6 phases. Phase -2 through 0 lead to the chain launch, and then the others dictate how the progress getting toward the final vision, the final goal for AtomOne. So in phase -2, the task was to draft the founding documents, the initial distribution, the roadmap, which is what you're seeing. So spoiler alert, we did this already, and establish the baseline software versions for both Tendermint and the Cosmos SDK. Phase -1 was to submit this on-chain on the GovGen chain to allow the community of no with veto voters to deliberate and potentially endorse these proposals, and to establish the ATONE to photon conversion mechanism, which, as you may have noticed from a couple of slides before, it ended up being a very, very simple linear formula. Phase 0 is about launching the actual AtomOne chain as a minimal Gaia fork. Gaia is the Cosmos Hub, with very minimal changes. Actually, the only thing that was really changed was only the governance module. The other thing that we did was disable or remove a bunch of other modules, but we didn't really change anything. Well, for example, we removed the liquid staking module, gladly. Also, initially there is no photon. As I said, this is part of subsequent phases. IBC is currently disabled, although the code is there, and ICS is not deployed. As a last step that we need to do is to ratify all the founding documents, and now that the chain is launched, on the actual AtomOne hub. So involve the whole community to ratify everything that we have decided so far, and all this document to become the canonical accepted document for AtomOne. Phase 1 is going to be about further governance improvements, the deployment of Photon, and the first establishment of the core DAOs, and at least the build DAO as the first instance of a special purpose DAO. Phase 2 is going to be about refinements around validator election and incentives for validators and ICS, and to deploy the actual interchain security, an interchain security implementation. And phase 3 is all about essentially the DAOs. It's the final step to get to a complete AtomOne where the full-fledged functionalities of the DAOs is going to be activated throughout the whole ecosystem. So not only the hub chain, but also potentially consumer chains, and more specifically core shards. We will talk about that in a few slides. And allow the establishment of any special purpose DAOs, so basically have the code to allow this to happen. So not only the middle DAO, but any other special purpose DAO for special purposes in the future. So where are we? Actually, as I said, phase -2 and phase -1 are basically completed. We had already deployed the GovGen. We had deployed the governance platform, props to the team that did this, and the discussion forum using Commonwealth. We are basically at the tail end of phase 0. The only step that's missing is to ratify the documents through governance, but the chain is live. It's actually fresh news. It went live this Friday. So woohoo to that. And we are, of course, working actively towards getting phase 1 completed as fast as possible. In particular, so to mention what it's coming in the short term, of course, to really complete phase 0, the ratification of these established documents on the AtomOne using the AtomOne governance. And for phase 1, what we are actively working on right now, me and Thomas, is working on governance improvements. We are also taking some old work we did already for the decentralists, in particular about proposal throttling, which means try to contain the number of active proposals on the hub at all times, so that it's a maximum number of, let's say, 2, so that there is no governance fatigue for anyone, and people can really focus on 2 proposals at a time at the very maximum, and so provide their undivided attention to as few topics at once as possible. And we are working to build the Photon Cosmos SDK module. Of course, phase 1 also encompasses working on the DAO software. That is a little bit more complex, but it's coming as well. I just wanted to report on what we are working as of today. But of course, phase 1, that encompasses that step 2, so we work on that too. So to recap, how AtomOne differentiate from Cosmos Hub. So token model, single token for Atom, and with all the problems that can come with that, especially if people push for changing the nature of the staking token to a monetary token. For AtomOne, we have a dual token model where we have ATONE as the security token and Photon as the fee token. The governance structure is the canonical, classical Cosmos SDK implementation for the Cosmos Hub, where, for example, I think arguably a very important piece of the puzzle is that validators can use their staking delegation also to vote on governance. While this, for example, doesn't happen at all on the AtomOne Hub, where validators don't inherit their staking delegations to vote on governance. But arguably, I would argue that that's not the only or the most important innovation, but I would say the presence of a constitution, the chain launched with the constitution embedded in the chain state, the future, this vision of creating these DAOs to complement the governance, especially in particular the core DAOs that I talked about. Specialized DAOs don't really have anything to do with governance. They are special purpose. And possibly governors. But I want to touch briefly on this very second to last slide. The focus, I told you I was going to say this again. For the Cosmos Hub, unfortunately, it has become experimentation. We have CosmoWasm on the hub. We have the liquid staking module. They are deploying Hydro, which fortunately, thanks to our reports, they decided not to use the liquid staking module, but that means they will have to change the staking module anyway. So again, more changes to the hub. So long minimalism, so long no experimentation. While, for example, the inability to perform any experimentation on the root chain is explicitly stated in the constitution for AtomOne, which again means that the focus is minimalism, security, and decentralization. Finally, for staking, Cosmos Hub is transitioning away from the dynamic inflation. Yes, the code is still there, but inflation cannot move as of today. And there are many pushes actually to change this behavior and basically altering completely how staking works on the Cosmos Hub. And liquid staking support, which we consider a systemic threat to staking, is actually supported at protocol level. Instead, for AtomOne, the original design of the dynamic inflation that targets 2/3 bonding ratio is going to stay untouched, and liquid staking is completely banned. In particular, through means of banning staking using interchain accounts, for the people that understand what I'm saying, but more in general, any form of liquid staking is banned and will be subject to punishments in case there is some quirky way of doing liquid staking. This might open up for repercussions, let's say. To recap, what are the key innovations? Basically, we can summarize 4 key innovations for AtomOne. Governance improvements, a more refined voting mechanism, and the introduction of a formal constitution and laws. A dual token model where ATONE provides security and Photon allows for payments. And there is a one-way burn from ATONE to Photon. Focus on interchain security, where I'm going to dive slightly deeper, I think, in a couple of slides on this. But we have a differentiation between core and consumer shards. All the fees are collected in Photon, and also there is a focus on using a container-like technology to basically enhance ICS, to refine interchain security, and use this technology to allow for deployment and orchestration of consumer chains, of ICS secure chains. And finally, the DAO structure that I presented you earlier, with the establishment of core DAOs and sub-DAO and their sub-DAOs and special purpose DAOs, where basically eventually everything is going to happen completely transparently on chain, and so all the decision making will be decentralized, accountable, because it's going to be transparent, and basically, yeah, it's the same thing. So accountable and transparent, and by extension accountable. Let's look again at governance improvement. So again, we have a formal constitution that guides all proposals. We have formalized laws as a means to enhance and complement the constitution. We have established some core DAOs. So I'm talking here all about the core DAOs that have specialized governance roles, governance facilitation through the steering DAO, and supervision and upholding of the constitution through the oversight DAO. An important differentiation from day one, from now already, from the Cosmos Hub. So with the deployed software, validators do not inherit staking delegations when voting in governance, can only use their own stake. Also, we have abolished the no with veto vote option and raised the minimum passing threshold to 2/3 plus. Another thing we want to do is, hopefully, if we are doing research on this, but the hope is that we can get to an actual implementation that is performing and it's technically sound. For governors, let me talk briefly about what's this. So in classic Cosmos governance, the validators that receive staking delegation equally increase by the same amount their voting power. So whenever you delegate it through staking to a validator, you're also delegating your governance voting power to the validator. We have removed this, but of course, this can cause a little bit of friction because you need higher participation. So one way to address this problem might be to still allow a form of delegation specific to governance, but to some entities that aren't necessarily validators. So let's assume that there is someone that wants to become a governor and they fulfill some defined requirements, which might be certain amount of minimum self-stake or to further lock your stake for a longer period or both, right? And by doing that, they become governors and they are eligible to receive governance delegations. What that means is that people can delegate their governance voting power, but in a completely segregated system from the staking delegations, which also means that this can be a more liquid way, not to confuse with liquid staking, just liquid governance, liquid way of doing delegations, because there are constraints when dealing with staking delegations, and we need to be careful when managing those. But if the two systems are segregated, that means, for example, then I can freely redelegate my governance voting power to another governor at all times. There is no constraint induced by the dependency on the staking module. And the other thing we are looking at is to dynamically adjust the quorum, because you can imagine, for example, we have removed delegations, we have increased passing threshold on AtomOne. The obvious thing that we had to do was to lower the quorum, because there is the risk of not getting enough engagement. Having a static quorum that is too low might require constant adjustment or might not simply be appropriate, right? So eventually, one thing that we will work on and hopefully get there is to have a dynamic way to adjust the quorum based on historical participations on proposals. And and also, as I already mentioned, the throttling of active proposals so that people can only really focus on a few proposals at a time, hopefully one or two and not more than that. Regarding ICS, I already mentioned earlier, so there is a differentiation in AtomOne between core shards and consumer shards. Core shards are going to be the way the AtomOne hub enriches its functionalities, right? Instead of deploying them on the hub, they will be deployed on consumer chains, on core shards that are, although completely subservient to the AtomOne hub governance, they are an extension of the functionalities of the chain by all intents and purposes. While consumer shards are more like customers in the sense that they will leverage the security offered by the AtomOne hub through interchain security, and they will completely retain their sovereignty and independence. Again, fees will be collected in Photon, which is going to be the fee token. And the idea is to initially deploy the partial set security system, where basically a partial subset of the validators can opt in to validate a specific consumer chain. And then possibly, if a more sustainable way of implementing the thing I'm talking about is going to be found, because, for example, on the Cosmos hub, it was, it prevented from deploying too many chains to have simple replicated security in which the whole validator set is basically replicated on the ICS secure chains. And finally, trying to develop this interchain security, this new implementation of interchain security centered around the usage of Linux-like of Linux containers, like Docker, for example, or not exactly Docker, but to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, to basically allow the scaling, the deployment and orchestration of the consumer chains using this technology. And for this, actually, we also have Nathan that has joined our team and is going to, his task is exactly to work on interchain security. And so we have, I want to stress out, these are actually also topics for, this is a topic for the grant program that we have in the company. But as I said, we also now have, fortunately, we have a new addition to our team that is also going to focus on this topic. So moving forward, as I said, I mentioned this already. So we're working towards completing phase number 1. And so photon, governance improvements, and the DAOs. There are some things that are still in flight in some way because we are researching and we are trying to develop these systems, and in particular, governors would be something that is not even mentioned. Well, there is an entry in the defined terms about governors, but really it isn't mentioned in the Constitution. So this might be a piece of innovation that would be completely novel. While instead, the second point, the dynamic quorum and active proposal throttling, is something that was already envisioned back even at the time of the decentralists. So when we were simply working on governance improvements as a team, me and Thomas. Also, validator selection. So how validators enter the active set so that we try and rewards distribution both for ICS and more generically, so that we try to achieve a very high Nakamoto coefficient, which means decentralization. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, work on ICS and using container technology for interchain security. In conclusion, I provided you with the AtomOne vision for a minimal, secure, and decentralized blockchain and ecosystem. I hope I've stressed out enough the key innovation that set it apart from the predecessors, but more like the Cosmos Hub, and the commitment to community-driven governance and development. And ultimately, really in conclusion, one could say that AtomOne objective is to reestablish the original vision of the Cosmos Hub, and of course, to push it forward.